Welcome back to The Lead, our politics lead now. It was already one of the most closely watched congressional races of the midterm election, involving a man considered a new hope for the Republican Party. But now it's getting ugly with claims that the openly gay GOP candidate harassed a staffer. We want to warn you that this next story has some graphic content and is likely not suitable for children. CNN investigative reporter Chris Frates sat down exclusively with the accuser.
For individual freedom.
Carl DeMaio is a rising Republican star, backed by heavyweight congressional leaders like Mitch McConnell and John Boehner, even endorsed by Michael Bloomberg. He's positioned as a GOP candidate for a new generation.
Carl DeMaio, a new generation Republican.
After losses in 2012, top Republicans concluded in a review they must recruit more minority candidates. It's a problem DeMaio helped solve. Just look at how a local newspaper described him in its endorsement. A gay man who will chip away at the party's image as intolerant and inflexible. National media has repeatedly declared DeMaio a candidate to watch. DeMaio first came onto the national scene when he lost to Democrat Bob Filner in the race for San Diego mayor. But Filner was forced to step down after 18 women claimed sexual harassment. DeMaio had tried to make Filner's behavior a campaign issue.
And you need a mayor who's going to insist on zero tolerance when it comes to the issue of sexual harassment.
But now DeMaio is being tested by allegations about his own sexual misbehavior and accusations of harassment. It's an issue that escalated this week when he was asked about it at a campaign news conference.
Absolutely untrue.
The allegations come from a former campaign staffer who sat down on camera with CNN. Todd Bosnich says he joined DeMaio's campaign last year, eager to work for a candidate who shared his values and who, like himself, is an openly gay Republican. But he says he was fired after complaining about DeMaio's aggressive sexual behavior.
He asked me to come over to his office, which is in the back, and when I came over to his office door, it was open, and he was masturbating.
And so what did you see when you walked in?
I saw his penis in his hand, and he had a smile on his face, and as soon as I came over, he was looking at me.
So there was no mistaking what was happening?
There was no mistaking whatsoever.
Bosnich, who became the campaign's policy director, says DeMaio would repeatedly find him alone and make inappropriate advances, massaging and kissing his neck and groping him. He says it started one evening after drinks with the staff at a local bar. Bosnich says DeMaio gave him a ride back to his car.
We were making small talk on the way back, and when he pulled up to my car, he reached over into my lap and grabbed my crotch. And I flipped out, and I pushed his hand away.
And how did it make you feel?
I just was shocked because I'd never had anyone do something like that to me, especially in a position of authority and trust. And at the time, I just figured, well, maybe he was drunk and blew it off, but he progressively, the inappropriate touching and incidents continued from there.
It was several more months, according to Bosnich, before he mentioned the behavior to the campaign manager.
The campaign manager who, laughed it off, that's just the way Carl is, and that if I really felt that uncomfortable, I shouldn't have let him know that I'm a gay man.
And so he was essentially saying to you, well, it was your fault.
Exactly. He was implying that it's my fault, that it's incumbent on me to stop Carl DeMaio from these behaviors, and I was really offended.
A few weeks after the alleged masturbation incident, Bosnich says he confronted DeMaio.
You need to either stop or drop out of the race, was basically my main point. And then it was the very next day in the morning that the campaign manager called me into his office and said that Carl lost his trust in me and that he terminated me. He offered me a position in the county Republican Party, and also told me to sign a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for $50,000.
Was that hush money?
I'll let it speak for itself.
How did you look at it?
I took it as an attempt to bribe me to keep my silence.
Bosnich says he left the campaign without taking any money or signing any papers. He recorded an interview with a local conservative radio station outlining his allegations. That interview never aired. but CNN obtained a copy of that recording. After hearing it, we took Bosnich's allegations directly to DeMaio, catching up with him after a campaign news conference.
I mean, he says that you were inappropriate in the office, that you would touch him, kiss him, grab his butt.
What I can say is that the police department
let me finish the litany. And he also says that you went out for drinks with the staff. You drove him home.
Not true. None of it's
You grabbed
true.
his crotch. And then
DeMaio denied Bosnich's claims, saying that they are the cover story of a plagiarist and suspected criminal.
This is an individual that was let go by our campaign manager for plagiarism, a well-documented plagiarism incident of taking a report from the National Journal and passing it off as his own work. He was terminated. He admitted that he plagiarized. He apologized for plagiarizing. And when we told him he was no longer welcome in the staff and in the campaign office, even as a volunteer, he left. Days later, he broke in.
DeMaio claims the San Diego Police Department is investigating Bosnich for breaking into DeMaio's campaign headquarters, smashing computers, and cutting phone lines just days before the primary.
It's unfortunate. He's clearly troubled. He got caught for the damage that he did to the campaign, and now he's manufacturing, in essence, a cover story to explain away his actions. It's unfortunate. It's untrue. And my hope is that the police department will hold him accountable for his actions against our campaign.
And you can provide us with the evidence
Absolutely.
that shows both the break-in
Absolutely.
and both the evidence that would refute his claims here that you somehow were inappropriate.
Absolutely. Why don't you come back to the office? We'll walk you through every single email, text message. I think that you will be satisfied.
We went to DeMaio's campaign headquarters and were briefly shown some documents and other materials. They wouldn't let us copy them or describe them to you, and they did not on their own appear to refute Bosnich's claims. Police confirmed they investigated the break-in and sent their findings to the district attorney for review. And Bosnich confirms he was interviewed by police.
4 months after the campaign office break-in, police still haven't charged anyone with a crime, and they refuse to discuss the case on camera or name any potential suspects. Did you break into Carl DeMaio's office?
No, I did not.
Bosnich also denies that he was the one who plagiarized from the National Journal.
After interviewing Bosnich on camera, CNN repeatedly tried to get detailed answers from the DeMaio campaign. First, the campaign spokesman demanded to talk to my bosses, and then had a top GOP consultant take over that call, accusing CNN of going on a partisan witch hunt.
When we followed up with a detailed list of questions, including whether the campaign manager knew about Bosnich's complaints, the campaign then hired 2 high-powered Washington attorneys who asked for even more time and more information about what CNN had. CNN followed up with a second detailed letter laying out the information they requested. The next day, CNN finally got a response from the lawyers. Contact the campaign with your questions. Back to square one. Their statement was almost exactly what they said when we first asked about it. This is not the first time DeMaio has been accused of sexually inappropriate behavior. Last year, a fellow city councilman said he caught DeMaio masturbating in a city hall restroom, twice. It's a claim DeMaio denied, even taking a polygraph test to support his denial.
This lie crossed the line. It's so gross. It's so untrue. It's so humiliating that it demands a response.
Now Todd Bosnich has taken an independent lie detector test to support his allegations.
It corroborated my account of being sexually harassed by Carl DeMaio.
Bosnich's attorney gave us a copy of the polygraph results, and the report says no deception indicated.
Jake, House Speaker John Boehner is holding a private fundraiser for DeMaio this week.
This is the same congressional seat that was held by Democrat Bob Filner, who later was chased out of office because of sexual harassment.
Adjacent, but very close.
Adjacent, but it's San Diego area.
San Diego.
Wow, Chris Frates, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Tax day is tomorrow. I don't know if you need any reminding, but while Americans are scrambling to make sure all their 1099s are in order, you'd expect members of the House Ways and Means Committee, the ones who write our nation's tax laws, you'd expect that they would know how not to run afoul of the IRS. But as our own Chris Frates reports, some of those lawmakers continue to face tax problems of their very own.
The powerful House Ways and Means Committee is responsible for writing our nation's tax laws. Yet a CNN investigation has found that at least 8 of the committee's 39 members have faced tax problems of their own.
I wanted to relate to you.
Take New York Congressman Tom Reed. He's been late paying his property taxes not once, not twice, but 46 times since 2005. According to county records, he racked up more than $6,200 in penalties and interest on more than $100,000 in taxes. On this stunning lakefront property in New York's Finger Lakes and this Corning home, Reed missed a combined 16 tax payments in 9 years. These 4 buildings had a total of 20 late payments in the past 8 years, and the list goes on.
What happened? Why were you late on your taxes?
Well, it's just like a lot of people. These are things that just happen, and they were paid within the allotted time.
But unlike a lot of people, Reed is a member of Congress, writing our nation's tax laws.
Should you be helping write the tax laws if you're having trouble following them?
Well, these are real property tax bills, which is different than what the Ways and Means does with income tax bills. We're paying them. We paid them within the allotted time, and that's it. Appreciate it.
Reed likened the late tax payments to missing a utility bill, saying that while he was late and paid penalties because of it, the taxes never went unpaid.
It's outrageous.
Steve Ellis is with Taxpayers for Common Sense.
Nobody wants to feel like a chump when they're paying their taxes, and if they see that their lawmakers, the ones who actually write the tax laws, aren't paying their bills, it's going to make them wonder why they're paying theirs.
Then there's Ohio Congressman Jim Renacci. For years, he fought state tax officials, refusing to pay nearly $1.4 million in back income taxes, interest, and penalties. Renacci declined several interview requests, but a spokeswoman said he was, quote, appealing a unilateral and retroactive tax. But the Ohio Tax Commissioner disagreed, writing in the final ruling that his fellow Republican, quote, failed to act in good faith. Renacci finally paid his bill.
Second issue that
Another Ohioan, Representative Pat Tiberi, was criticized for not paying employment taxes on his campaign workers. Instead of hiring employees for the 2008 and 2010 campaigns, he hired consultants as independent contractors and avoided the payroll taxes.
you have a contractor.
The Republicans said the practice was above board.
And you feel like you followed the IRS rules on
Absolutely,
that?
we have a tax lawyer. That's part of the reason why campaigns are so expensive, because we have a CPA who does our filing. We have tax lawyers that are on call to make sure that we follow the letter of law.
Tax issues by other Ways and Means members run the gamut, from the tiny, Paul Ryan had to pay a $59 fine for understating his income,
This is a very important.
to the mundane, Indiana Republican Todd Young paid $1,500 in tax penalties after a mortgage escrow mix-up, to the outrageous. Florida Republican Vern Buchanan's IRS problems cost him $2.5 million. But perhaps the biggest price was paid by New York Democrat Charlie Rangel, who lost his chairmanship of the committee. He was censured in part because he failed to pay taxes on the rental income from his swank villa in the Dominican Republic.
Lots of Americans run afoul of tax laws, but you'd think the people who are actually writing it wouldn't get this wrong.
We checked out every member of the committee, both Democrats and Republicans. And while some of these tax issues could happen to anybody, others are more egregious. But regardless of their severity, the fact remains that 20% of the men and women charged with writing our nation's tax laws have had tax problems themselves. Jake?
We begin with the politics lead and a CNN exclusive. The traffic metaphors come all too easily in midst of the George Washington Bridge scandal enveloping New Jersey governor and potential 2016 presidential hopeful Chris Christie. While many are still rubbernecking at the political wreck his close aides apparently created through a petty vendetta, Christie's problems are turning into a pile-up. Okay, enough traffic metaphors. Moving on, as CNN reported first, the Republican is now under a federal investigation into whether he misused Hurricane Sandy relief funds, specifically on an ad campaign to attract tourists back to the Sandy-ravaged Jersey Shore, which just happened to feature Christie, his wife, their kids, while he sought re-election. Now, the timing of this could not be worse for Christie. Democrats in both the state assembly and state senate announced new committees to investigate the traffic debacle on the GW Bridge, apparently orchestrated by aides close to Christie. The governor did apologize at great length and fired 2 aides who were implicated, but these new developments indicate that his trouble may only have just begun. Let's bring in CNN investigative correspondent Chris Frates. He broke the story. Chris.
Hey, Jake. So federal officials are now looking into another controversy of Governor Chris Christie's. This has to do with federal taxpayer money that was for Hurricane Sandy relief.
When Hurricane Sandy hit New Jersey, Chris Christie led from the trenches, and his skillful response to the devastating superstorm rocketed him into political superstardom.
Thank you for doing that.
But a new federal investigation into how the New Jersey governor spent some of the Sandy relief money could threaten to wash away the foundation of his political brand. CNN has learned that federal investigators will examine the state's $25 million tourism marketing campaign, a campaign that was paid for with Sandy recovery money.
The Jersey Shore is open.
The word is spreading. Because we're stronger than the storm.
You bet we are.
A campaign that featured Christie and his family during an election year.
Instead of working together.
Democratic Congressman Frank Pallone, a vocal Christie critic, requested the investigation, and federal officials tell CNN it's now moving ahead. But Pallone says this is not about politics.
This was money that could have directly been used for Sandy recovery. And as you know, many of my constituents still haven't gotten the money that is owed them, to rebuild their homes or to put their, to raise their homes or to help.
Pallone says promoting New Jersey tourism after the superstorm was a good idea, but he has a big question about how much taxpayer money was spent to make those ads. The winning bid, a $4.7 million campaign featuring Christie and family. The next lower bid that lost out was nearly half the price at $2.5 million and wouldn't have featured the governor, according to Pallone. The ads caused controversy as they hit the airways while Christie was running for re-election. Christie's opponents slammed him, arguing it gave the incumbent governor an unfair advantage. And Senator Rand Paul addressed it at a hearing in November.
You think there might be a conflict of interest there. That's a real problem. And that's why when people who are trying to do good and trying to use taxpayers' money wisely, they're offended to see our money spent on political ads. That's just offensive.
At the time, Christie aides said the winning bid provided more value. And today, the governor's office released a statement saying, federal agency reviews are routine and standard operating procedure to ensure that funds are distributed fairly. We're confident that any review will show that the ads were a key part in helping New Jersey get back on its feet after being struck by the worst storm in state history. But after an initial review of the Sandy relief spending, the Office of the Inspector General at the Department of Housing and Urban Development has concluded that there is enough evidence to launch a full-scale investigation.
Taxpayer dollars that could have been used for Sandy relief were used for ads promoting the governor, because he was in them with his family, during an election campaign.
Christie's office questions the timing of the investigation. Indeed, it couldn't come at a worse time for the scandal-plagued New Jersey Republican. Christie is already facing 2 probes into whether his staff tied up traffic near the country's busiest bridge to punish a Democratic mayor who refused to endorse him. But as bad as the George Washington Bridge scandal has been for Christie, if the investigation finds he improperly spent Sandy funds, it could get far worse, tarnishing the signature achievement that has helped propel him toward the White House.
Now, the HUD Inspector General's office confirms they're investigating, but it will likely take months before a full report will be released to the public, Jake.
All right, Chris Frates, thank you so much.
We're learning some exclusive new details about the man at the center of the New Jersey traffic scandal, a Christie political ally who held a job created especially for him, personally orchestrated the lane closures that brought a city to its knees. Did he have a direct connection to the governor, or did he simply go rogue? Let's turn to CNN's Chris Frates of CNN Investigations. He's been looking into this. What are you finding out?
Well, we're finding out that while Governor Christie has distanced himself from David Wildstein, we're learning some pretty interesting new details from sources inside the Port Authority.
Time for some traffic problems in Fort Lee. Got it. With that 2-word response, David Wildstein helped set off a scandal that threatens to derail New Jersey Governor Chris Christie's second term, and maybe even his presidential ambitions. And now CNN is learning new information about Wildstein, the man who occupied a key post at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey and is at the center of the Bridgegate scandal. He refused to answer questions from state lawmakers last week.
So I assert my right to remain silent.
Wildstein's position, Director of Interstate Capital Projects, was created just for him at the direction of the governor's office, according to a former employee familiar with Port Authority hiring practices. Indeed, Wildstein's post didn't even exist before he filled it in 2010, according to Port Authority documents examined by CNN. Before Christie became governor, there were only 4 positions in the top New Jersey office at Port Authority. Christie increased the number to 6. Wildstein personally directed the infamous lane closures on the George Washington Bridge in September, and that has thrust Christie into the center of multiple investigations over whether the closure was political retaliation. The revelations come in new documents released today by the U.S. Senate Commerce Committee. They paint a picture of a man who went rogue, closing lanes without following proper procedures, despite warnings of traffic backups and safety risks. Christie distanced himself from Wildstein after the story broke, especially after it was reported the two attended the same high school.
David and I were not friends in high school. We were not even acquaintances in high school.
High school acquaintances contacted by CNN backed up the governor. In fact, Christie's high school baseball coach, Tony Hope, said the two could not have been more different.
No one could ever say a bad thing about Chris. Everything extremely positive. All his friends, I mean, they loved him. He was as popular as a person could be. And David was very quiet, also extremely intelligent, but didn't have great social skills.
But by the time Wildstein was hired at the Port Authority in 2010, he was being introduced to people as a good friend of Christie's, according to a source, though the governor says the two are not close.
You know, I could probably count on one hand the number of conversations I've had with David since he worked at the Port Authority.
Sources tell CNN Wildstein was viewed as Christie's eyes and ears, scrutinizing agency business on the governor's behalf. They believe he spoke for the governor and, in turn, watched what they said around him, assuming their words would end up back in the governor's ear. Though the governor's office says this is inaccurate and has been, quote, mischaracterized by the media. Christie's office also provided us with this response. As the governor made clear last week, David Wildstein is not a childhood friend, and his interactions with him over the last 4 years have been limited. Last month, he appointed a new leader at the Port Authority with a proven record of rooting out corruption and reforming government agencies to help lead the agency.
Now, when Chris Christie came into office, the governor said the Port Authority was on the list of agencies that needed to be reformed. So, Wolf, it's kind of ironic that the governor targeted this Port Authority for improvement, and now it's come back to bite him a little bit.
Yeah, it certainly has. All right, Chris, thanks very much. Chris Frates reporting.
Welcome back. Here's a question that might leave you maybe a little bit cynical about your choice of candidates tomorrow. Perhaps you'll end up feeling lucky at the high-quality candidates you happen to have, depending on where you live. So here's the question. What do a felon, an adulterer, an alleged fraudster, and a guy accused of sexual harassment have in common? The answer, and you probably saw this coming, they all want to be members of Congress. What's more, almost all of them have a shot at getting elected tomorrow. More on why and who those characters are from CNN's Chris Frates.
The candidates may be a better fit for a soap opera than a ballot. There's the House candidate from California who's accused of sexually harassing a campaign staffer, and the New York congressman federally indicted on tax fraud. And then there's the duo from the Bayou, the kissing congressman and an ex-governor turned ex-con.
2014 is a great year for bad boys of Congress. It's unusual in the sense that we've rarely seen this many members who are in trouble personally or legally with strong chances to win re-elections.
Welcome to South Louisiana.
After serving almost 9 years in prison after an extortion conviction, Edwin Edwards is back in Louisiana. He was elected to 4 terms as a Democratic governor, using such colorful campaign slogans as, "Vote for the crook, it's important."
My God is not finished with me.
But this time around, he has a tougher race. As a Democrat running in a district Romney won 2-1 in the 2012 presidential race. Also in Louisiana, Vance McAllister, better known as the kissing congressman. After getting caught on tape making out with his scheduler, McAllister dropped his re-election bid, only to jump back into the race a few months later, with his wife by his side.
And I'm blessed to have a husband who owns up to his mistakes.
In California, candidate Carl DeMaio faces serious charges of sexual harassment, as first reported by CNN.
He reached over into my lap and grabbed my crotch, and I flipped out.
DeMaio denies the allegations, saying his accuser broke into his campaign office after he was fired, though no charges were filed. Even after weeks of bad headlines, DeMaio's race is still neck and neck.
We're going to fight tooth and nail until I am fully exonerated.
New York Congressman Michael Grimm, who's set to fight charges next month that include perjury, obstruction of justice, and tax evasion, is polling slightly ahead of his opponent, despite a serious lack of interpersonal skills.
Why? Let me be clear to you. You have to do that to me again in 3 years.
Despite that, he won Rudy Giuliani's endorsement.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Political experts say increased partisanship means that candidates' baggage often matters less than whether they have a D or an R after their name.
As long as you're wearing the right colored jersey in your district, it doesn't matter if you're going to be wearing a jumpsuit in a couple months. You still have a shot at winning your seat in Congress.
Chris Frates, CNN, Washington.
Welcome back to The Lead, and our politics lead now, as you can see by our set, it's just over 2 weeks until Election Day. Today we're going to follow one of the most bitter, hard-fought Senate races in the country, Kentucky Senate race. The Secretary of State there, Allison Lundergan Grimes, is trying to unseat the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, the man who may find himself running the Senate if he can survive her challenge. The race, though, may not hinge on such major issues. Instead, it might come down to, in some ways, a flap over burgers and wages and double entendres. CNN investigative reporter Chris Frates traveled to the bluegrass state for this report.
In her race to defeat Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, Allison Lundergan Grimes has barnstormed Kentucky, talking up her support for raising the minimum wage.
I'm fighting for all Kentuckians, all working Americans across this nation. I don't believe $7.25 an hour raises a family of four above the poverty level.
So you might be surprised to find out that Grimes' family business pays some tipped employees only minimum wage. Here in Kentucky, servers at Huge Ass Burgers, yep, you heard that right, make just $2.13 an hour. That's the minimum wage for tipped employees, and it hasn't budged since the 90s. The minimum wage for workers who aren't making tips is $7.25 an hour, a figure that last increased 5 years ago. So what gives? We went to Kentucky to find out.
For me, it's about making sure that hardworking Kentuckians have a bright future, and that future includes having not just a minimum wage, but a living wage.
And at the restaurant owned by Grimes' family, a living wage includes one that depends on tips.
My family is not in this race. I'm on the ballot.
What Grimes doesn't mention is that while she doesn't own the restaurant, she did do some of its legal work, signing the business and corporation documents and representing the restaurant in a lawsuit. The minimum wage isn't the only issue where the restaurant doesn't practice what Grimes preaches. On the campaign trail, she's been an advocate for women's issues. Her camp even accused Republicans of sexism.
I am the Kentucky woman who my Republican colleagues here in this state so gentlemanly refer to as an empty dress.
But check out what's on the menu at Huge Ass Burgers.
Charlotte's Rack, sure to be voted biggest rack. Ribs named after her mom. And Abby's Huge Ass, a burger named after her sister. And they sell souvenir items like this Check Out My Buns apron.
When we tried to ask Grimes about her family's use of double entendre, she walked away surrounded by security, leaving us holding the greasy burger bag.
With 2 weeks to go, the race remains tight, but national Democrats have started putting their money elsewhere. Not a great sign for Grimes. Jake?
Chris Frates, thank you so much.